Hi everyone, in this week's dispatch video we are discussing another question which came in from a client last week around a historic overpayment of salary which the business was trying to recover. The difficulty was in this case that the overpayment was fairly significant in that it was an additional month's salary and it was only discovered some 2 years after the time. Thankfully, the individual was still employed by the business. So as with many cases in employment law, we are looking at what documents or agreements we have in place which might provide the facility to exercise a certain power. In this case, we look to the contract to see whether or not, firstly, there is a clause which permits us to make deductions from wages, because typically that is how we're going to recover the sum. It's important to state here that even if we do have an express clause that permits us to make deductions from wages, clauses such as this are always subject to a reasonable exercise of discretion. We also have an implied duty under the contract to maintain trust and confidence, and the risk of operating an express deductions clause in an unfair or unreasonable way is that we could be in breach of that term and that duty to maintain trust and confidence. So what we're looking at here essentially in acting reasonably is looking at the scale of the deduction from wages that we're proposing to make, the amount of consultation, the amount of notice that we're giving to the employee. So I would always say in this case, if we're looking at a month's salary, for example, yes, it's very overdue and very urgent from our perspective that it comes back in, but equally the employee is not likely to be in a position to just fund that additional pay, even if our argument is they really should have been putting this to one side or even notifying us, because they must have been aware that that overpayment was made. So in this case, discussion with the employee, making it clear that we are committed to a repayment plan, perhaps putting that in writing and stating that if the employee leaves, the full balance becomes due. But deducting over a period of time is certainly going to be reasonable, or having the employee essentially work it off by increasing the overtime that they might be working if that attracts additional payment. The significant difficulty is if there is no contractual right to make that deduction in the circumstances. There is the principle of restitution which applies in circumstances where a mistake of law or fact has caused the overpayment to be made. However, the longer that goes on without recovery, the more the employee may be able to argue the defence of change of position. So things are becoming quite convoluted at this point in the advice, but essentially, if we try and rely on a contractual principle of restitution, i.e. that we made the payment by mistake, the employee could say, well, actually, this is so old that I changed my position. I did take the money and I've not factored that repayment in. I was living on the basis that repayment would not need to be made, and as such, that is my defence. We really don't want to be in that position, and again, ideally, we would have a clause within the contract that permits that deduction to be made. I hope you found that video to be useful. If you do need any assistance on this point or anything generally, please do get in touch. Visit the website chadwicklawrence.co.uk or email employmenthub@chadlaw.co.uk. Thank you.